I'm Julie, 35 female. My life has always been about order, about preserving the past in a way that makes sense of the present. As an archivist, I spend my days surrounded by carefully cataloged histories, by stories filed and protected from the decay of time. My husband, David, a software engineer, lives in a world of digital logic, a place of clean code and predictable outcomes. Our life together in a cramped city apartment was a quiet, organized existence, a shared world built on trust and the comforting rhythm of our respective careers. We were saving for a future that felt as neatly planned as the archives I curated. A house, a yard, a space to finally breathe. The teaser to this story, the dark turn it took, began not with a stranger, but with family and a betrayal that would threaten to wash away the very foundations of the life we had so carefully built. It is a story about how the deepest cracks are not in the walls of a house, but in the trust you place in the people you are supposed to love the most. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The decision to buy a house is never a small one. For David and me, it was the culmination of 5 years of disciplined saving, of bypassing expensive vacations, of brown bagging lunches, and of dreaming over architectural magazines on quiet Sunday mornings. We had a binder, thick with printouts and notes, a testament to our shared goal. Our apartment, while cozy and filled with love, was beginning to feel like a cage. We yearned for a backyard for a future dog, a second bedroom for a home office that wasn't also the dining room, and the simple luxury of not hearing our upstairs neighbors practice their tap dancing routines at 11 o'clock at night. The search was both exhilarating and exhausting. We spent weekends driving through suburbs, attending open houses, and trying to picture our lives within the walls of strangers. We saw houses that were too small, houses that were too big, and houses that were priced so far beyond our reach that it felt like a cruel joke. It was during a family dinner, seated around my sister's polished oak table, that the solution seemed to present itself, gift-wrapped and tied with a bow of familial obligation. My brother-in-law, Ethan, sat across from me, exuding the effortless confidence of a successful real estate agent. He had a gleaming smile, a firm handshake, and an answer for everything. He had always been the golden boy of the family, charming, ambitious, and as he often reminded us, a top seller at his agency for 3 years running. "Julie, David, I hear the house hunt is getting you down," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "You're going about this all wrong. You're trawling through public listings, competing with dozens of other buyers. You need an inside track. You need family." He winked, and my sister beamed at him with pride. David and I exchanged a hopeful glance. We were tired of the relentless competition, of being outbid on houses we had already mentally decorated. Ethan's offer felt like a lifeline. He promised us access to off-market listings, properties that hadn't even hit the websites yet. He said he would be our advocate, our champion, ensuring we got the best possible deal. "I'll take care of you," he promised, his tone laced with sincerity. That's what family is for. We took him up on his offer, and the difference was immediate. The generic email alerts were replaced by personal calls from Ethan, his voice buzzing with excitement about an exclusive property he had just found for us. A week later, he called with what he described as the one. It was a charming 2-story colonial in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, just the kind of place we had dreamed of. It was an estate sale, he explained, belonging to an elderly woman who had recently passed away. Her children, eager to sell quickly and without hassle, were willing to price it competitively. "It's got great bones," Ethan told us, his enthusiasm infectious. "A few cosmetic updates, maybe a new coat of paint, and you'll have your forever home. And the best part? No bidding war. I can get them to accept an offer before it even goes on the market." The moment we pulled up to the curb, I felt a flutter of excitement. The house was even more charming in person, with a wide front porch and large windows that seemed to promise a home filled with light. Inside, it was a little dated, with floral wallpaper and avocado green appliances, but Ethan was right. The bones were good. The layout was perfect, the rooms were spacious, and there was a large, beautifully maintained backyard. David was already picturing his home office in the spare bedroom, while I was mentally placing our furniture in the living room. We were so caught you. P in the fantasy, in the relief of finally finding a place that felt like ours, that we allowed Ethan to guide our perspective. He pointed out the new roof, installed just 2 years prior, and the solid-looking foundation. He had an answer for every question, a plausible explanation for every minor flaw. The faint, musty smell in the basement just needs a good airing out, he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. It's been closed up for a while. A small, discolored patch on the ceiling of the downstairs bathroom, barely noticeable in the dim light? Probably just a bit of condensation from the shower, he assured us. Nothing a good fan and some stain-blocking primer can't fix. We trusted him. Why wouldn't we? He was family. He was David's brother, my brother-in-law, a man we had shared holidays and birthdays with for over a decade. The idea that he would be anything less than completely honest with us never crossed our minds. He recommended a home inspector, a colleague he had worked with for years, who gave the house a glowing report. A solid old house, the inspector had said, his report confirming Ethan's assessment. A few minor, easily fixable issues were noted, but nothing that raised any red flags. Ethan guided us through the paperwork, streamlining the process and making it feel effortless. He negotiated a price that was slightly under our maximum budget, a fact he brought up several times, framing it as a personal victory he had secured just for us. Looking back, the entire process was a masterclass in manipulation, a carefully constructed illusion designed to lead us to one specific outcome, signing on the dotted line. At the time, all we felt was gratitude and relief. We had found our home, and we had done it with the help of family. The day we got the keys was one of the happiest of our lives. We stood on the porch, the keys clutched in my hand, and looked out at our new life. The house was more than just wood and nails. It was the physical manifestation of our future. As Ethan clapped David on the back, a wide, triumphant smile on his face, he said, "See, I told you I'd take care of you." And we believed him. We had absolutely no reason not to. The first few weeks in the new house were a whirlwind of blissful chaos. We spent our days surrounded by cardboard boxes, the scent of fresh paint, and the sounds of our future taking shape. David, ever the pragmatist, set up our internet and methodically assembled furniture, while I, the curator of our shared history, carefully unpacked our belongings, finding the perfect spot for every book and photograph. We were creating a home, and every small act, from choosing a new welcome mat to planting a small herb garden in the backyard, felt imbued with a sense of permanence and joy. The house was everything we had hoped it would be. The large windows filled the rooms with afternoon light, and the quiet neighborhood was a welcome respite from the constant noise of the city. We hosted a small housewarming party, and our friends and family marveled at our good fortune. Ethan was the guest of honor, and he moved through the rooms with the air of a proud benefactor, accepting compliments on our behalf. "I knew this place was perfect for them," he said, raising a glass in a toast. "It just needed the right family to bring it back to life." We clinked our glasses together, our hearts full of gratitude. The first sign of trouble appeared on a Tuesday, about a month after we had moved in. It was a gray, drizzly afternoon, the kind of persistent, soaking rain that seems to seep into your bones. I was in the living room, sorting through a box of old records when I heard it, a faint, rhythmic dripping sound. I paused, tilting my head, trying to place the source. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Drip, drip, drip. I followed the sound to the downstairs bathroom, the one tucked away under the stairs. The room was dim, the small window offering little light on such an overcast day. I flipped the switch, and the overhead light flickered on, illuminating the source of the sound. A single drop of water clung to the ceiling, swelling and elongating before letting go and landing with a soft splash on the tiled floor. As I watched, another drop began to form in its place. My eyes traced the path of the water upward, and my stomach tightened. The small, discolored patch that Ethan and the home inspector had dismissed as a bit of condensation was now a swollen, angry-looking stain, the color of weak tea, and it was noticeably larger than I remembered. It was no longer a minor cosmetic issue. It was an active leak. I called David immediately, my voice tight with a mixture of annoyance and anxiety. He came home from work early, and together we stood in the small bathroom, staring up at the ceiling as if we could will the dripping to stop. "It's probably just a leaky pipe from the upstairs bathroom," he said, his voice a little too casual, a clear temp to soothe both my fears and his own. "I'll call a plumber first thing in the morning. It's probably a simple fix." He placed a bucket under the leak, and the sound of the dripping water became amplified, a constant, mocking reminder of the imperfection in our perfect new home. The plumber arrived the next morning, a gruff, no-nonsense man with a tool belt slung low on his hips. He took one look at the ceiling, poked it with a screwdriver, and let out a low whistle. "Well, that's not good," he said, his words landing like stones in the pit of my stomach. He explained that the leak was likely coming from the shower in the upstairs bathroom, but to know for sure, he would have to cut into the ceiling. With our permission, he sliced open a section of the drywall, and what he revealed made me gasp. The space between the floors was a disaster. The insulation was a sodden, mold-infested mess, and the wooden joists were dark with rot. The plumber shone his flashlight into the dark, damp space, revealing the extent of the damage. "This isn't a new problem," he said, his voice grim. "This has been happening for a long, long time. Years, maybe." He showed us where someone had attempted a shoddy repair, wrapping a section of pipe with duct tape and slathering it with some kind of sealant, a temporary fix that had clearly failed. He explained that to properly fix the plumbing and replace the rotted wood, it would be a major job, involving tearing out the upstairs shower and a large portion of the downstairs ceiling. The cost, he estimated, would be in the thousands. The news felt like a physical blow. We had poured all of our savings into the down payment and closing costs, and our budget for repairs was modest, intended for cosmetic updates, not major structural work. That evening, the house felt different. The comforting silence was now filled with the echo of the plumber's words, and every shadow seemed to hide another potential problem. We called Ethan, expecting sympathy and advice. Instead, his reaction was dismissive, almost irritated. "Look, Julie, these things happen with older houses," he said, his tone lacking its usual smooth charm. "That's what your home inspection was for. It's not my fault if the inspector missed something." His words were defensive, cold. There was no offer of help, no hint of concern for the financial and emotional stress we were now facing. He was washing his hands of the problem, distancing himself from the house he had so enthusiastically sold us. His reaction was a red flag, a discordant note in the symphony of familial trust he had so carefully composed. It was the first lie, the first crack in the facade. He hadn't just sold us a house, he had sold us a story of a solid, reliable home. And as the rain continued to fall outside, and the bucket in our bathroom continued to fill, we were beginning to realize that the story and the house were full of holes. The days following the plumber's visit were a blur of stress and anxiety. The initial estimate for the repairs was just the beginning. As the contractors began their work, tearing out the damaged sections of our home, the scope of the problem grew. The rot in the floor joists was more extensive than initially thought, and the mold had spread, a creeping, toxic bloom that required professional remediation. Our dream home had become a construction zone, the air thick with the dust of demolition and the acrid smell of antimicrobial spray. Our savings, so carefully accumulated over 5 years, were draining away at an alarming rate, each new discovery, each unexpected complication, another blow to our financial security. David and I grew tense, our conversations revolving around invoices and timelines, our sleep disrupted by worry. The house, which was supposed to be our sanctuary, now felt like a source of endless stress, a money pit that threatened to swallow our future. Through it all, Ethan remained conspicuously absent. He didn't call to check in, he didn't offer to help, and when we saw him at a family gathering, he was distant and evasive, changing the subject whenever we tried to talk about the house. His lack of concern was more than just disappointing, it was deeply suspicious. He had been so involved, so eager to guide us, so proud of the deal he had secured. Now, it was as if he wanted nothing to do with the property. The man who had promised to take care of us had vanished, replaced by a stranger who looked at us with a guarded, almost guilty expression. My trust in him had been shaken by his initial dismissiveness, but now it was beginning to crumble entirely. Something felt wrong. The shoddy, amateurish repair the plumber had found, the way Ethan was avoiding us, it all pointed to a story we weren't being told. The breakthrough, the discovery that would turn our suspicion into certainty, came from an unlikely source. As part of the remediation process, the contractors had to remove a section of HVAC ductwork in the basement. It was a dusty, forgotten corner of the house, a space we had barely glanced at since moving in. One of the workers, a young man named Alex, called me downstairs. He was holding a small, white object in his hand. "Found this in the vent," he said, holding it out to me. "Figured you might want it." It was a USB flash drive, the kind people used to carry on their keychains a decade ago. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, and it looked like it had been there for a very long time. I thanked Alex, my curiosity piqued. Who would drop a flash drive into a heating vent? I took it up to my temporary office, a corner of the bedroom we had cordoned off from the construction chaos, and plugged it into my laptop. The drive was old, and it took my computer a moment to recognize it. A single folder appeared on the screen, labeled House Docs. My heart began to beat a little faster. Inside the folder were dozens of files, digital copies of receipts, appliance manuals, and repair invoices. It was a meticulous record of the house's history, presumably kept by the previous owner, the elderly woman who had passed away. I scrolled through the files, a digital archaeologist piecing together the life of the home before it was ours, and then I saw it. A subfolder titled Water Damage 2021. I clicked on it, and a series of documents opened. There were photos, date-stamped from a little over a year before we bought the house, showing the exact same stain on the bathroom ceiling, only much worse. There were invoices from a plumbing company for an emergency call-out, but the final file was the one that made the air leave my lungs. It was a saved email chain. The sender was listed as Sarah Jenkins, the name of the previous homeowner. The recipient, the person she had been emailing, was my brother-in-law, Ethan. The first email was from Mrs. Jenkins, dated almost a year to the day before we had first viewed the house. Her tone was panicked, desperate. She wrote about a terrible leak from her upstairs bathroom, about the ceiling being completely soaked and water pouring into the downstairs bathroom. She wrote that her son, who lived out of state, had recommended she contact Ethan, as he was a family friend and a real estate agent, and she needed advice on how to handle the repairs and whether she needed to disclose the issue if she decided to sell the house in the near future. Ethan's reply was a few days later. His tone was calming, reassuring. "Don't you worry about a thing, Sarah," he wrote. "It sounds scary, but it's a common problem in these older houses. The most important thing is to get it fixed up so it doesn't cause any more trouble." He recommended a handyman, a name I didn't recognize, and told her that as long as the leak was repaired, there was no need to disclose it, as it would be considered a resolved issue. The final email was from Mrs. Jenkins a month later. She thanked Ethan for his help, saying the handyman he recommended had fixed the leak and repaired the ceiling. She was so grateful for his advice, for saving her the money and stress of a major repair and a complicated disclosure. I sat there, staring at the screen, the words blurring through a film of tears. It was all there, in black and white. Ethan hadn't just been aware of a potential issue, he knew the full extent of it. He knew there had been a severe leak, and he had advised the previous owner to patch it up cosmetically and keep it quiet. He had deliberately and methodically concealed a major defect in the house. He had steered us towards his preferred home inspector, a man who would undoubtedly overlook the telltale signs of the patch job. He had lied to us, to our faces, repeatedly. He had exploited our trust, our love, our family bond, all for the sake of a commission. The musty smell, the discolored patch, his dismissive attitude, it all clicked into place, forming a sickening mosaic of deceit. The man we had toasted at our housewarming party, the man who had promised to take care of us, had knowingly, and with premeditation, sold us a damaged, rotting house. He had looked us in the eye and lied. And in that moment, sitting in the dust and chaos of our broken home, my grief and shock began to curdle, hardening into something cold, sharp, and resolute. He had sold us a lie. Now I was going to uncover the truth. The discovery of the emails changed everything. The stress and anxiety that had been a constant, humming presence in our lives was now replaced by a cold, clear anger. It was a clarifying emotion, a lens that brought every interaction with Ethan over the past few months into sharp, painful focus. His feigned enthusiasm, his reassurances, his carefully chosen words, it had all been a performance. David, when I showed him the flash drive, was quiet for a long time, his face a mask of disbelief that slowly hardened into a reflection of my own fury. The betrayal was twofold. Ethan was his bro. And the casual, calculated nature of the deception was a wound far deeper than any financial loss. We were no longer just victims of an unfortunate situation. We were the targets of a deliberate fraud, perpetrated by a member of our own family. Our first step was to find the previous owner, Sarah Jenkins. Her name was on the emails, but her contact information was not. I started with the public records from the sale of the house, which listed a forwarding address for a retirement community 2 towns over. I found the number for the community online, and after a bit of gentle persuasion, was able to get a message to her. I explained that I was the new owner of her old house and just had a few questions. She returned my call that afternoon, her voice frail but friendly. I didn't want to ambush her, so I started slowly, telling her how much we loved the house and the neighborhood. I asked her about the gardens, and she spoke with warmth about the roses she had planted years ago. Then, I gently steered the conversation towards the house itself. "We've been doing a few renovations," I said, my voice carefully neutral, and the plumber found evidence of an old leak in the downstairs bathroom. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was laced with guilt. "Oh dear," she said softly, "I was so worried about that." She proceeded to tell me the exact story I had read in the emails. She spoke of the panic she felt when the ceiling started leaking, of her son telling her to call Ethan for help. "He was such a nice young man," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "He told me not to worry. He said it would be our little secret, that disclosing it would just complicate the sale and lower the price of the house. He said it was standard practice." She told me about the handyman Ethan had sent over, a man who had patched the ceiling and assured her the problem was fixed for good. She was a widow on a fixed income, and the thought of an expensive repair and a difficult sale had terrified her. Ethan had presented himself as her savior, a knowledgeable professional who was helping her navigate a stressful situation. She had trusted him completely. She had no idea the repair was merely cosmetic, a cheap patch designed to hide a much larger problem. As she spoke, my anger towards her softened into pity. She wasn't a co-conspirator. She was his first victim. Ethan had exploited her fear and her ignorance just as he had exploited our trust. I thanked her for her honesty and ended the call, my resolve hardening. The next piece of the puzzle was the home inspector. Ethan had recommended him so enthusiastically, and his report had been so clean. It was too convenient. I pulled out the report he had provided and found his name and business license number. A quick search online revealed a string of negative reviews, all with a similar theme: missed issues, cursory inspections, and a dismissive attitude when problems were later discovered. Several of the reviews mentioned that the inspector was frequently recommended by a specific real estate agency, the one Ethan worked for. It was a classic case of a preferred inspector, one who knew that his continued stream of referrals depended on him not finding any issues that could jeopardize a sale. David, with his software engineering skills, was able to dig a little deeper. He found a connection on a professional networking site between the inspector and Ethan, showing they had been connected for over 5 years. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was another piece of evidence, another thread in the web of deceit Ethan had woven. We now had a clear picture of the fraud. Ethan had been aware of the severe water damage. He had advised the elderly seller to conceal it with a cosmetic repair. He had then steered us, his own family, towards the house, knowing it was a ticking time bomb. To ensure the sale went through, he had recommended a complacent home inspector who he knew would overlook the shoddy patch job. Every step had been calculated to maximize his commission and minimize his own liability. He had used our love and trust as tools to facilitate his con. The financial cost was significant, but the emotional cost was immeasurable. He had tainted our dream, turning our sanctuary into a source of pain and betrayal, but he had underestimated us. He had mistaken our trust for naivety. We were not just going to fix the house, we were going to fix the injustice. We started documenting everything. We saved the emails from the flash drive. I wrote a detailed summary of my conversation with Mrs. Jenkins. We gathered the invoices from our contractors, and we took hundreds of photos of the damage. We were no longer just homeowners dealing with a leak. We were building a case. And our target was family. With our evidence compiled, the path forward became clear. We weren't just going to confront Ethan, we were going to expose him. A simple famil. Why argument would be his word against ours, a messy affair that he could easily wriggle out of with his practiced charm and plausible deniability. We needed something more definitive. We needed a confession. We needed to catch him in his own lie, in a way that he couldn't talk his way out of. The anger that had been simmering within me had now cooled into a patient, calculating resolve. My work as an archivist had taught me the value of meticulous documentation and the power of a well-preserved record. I was going to apply those same principles to the dismantling of my brother-in-law's career. Our lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Alina Vance who specialized in real estate litigation, reviewed the evidence we had gathered. She was impressed by the thoroughness of our documentation. The email chain between Ethan and Mrs. Jenkins was the key. "This is a slam dunk," she said, her expression grimly satisfied. "He knowingly concealed a material defect. That's fraud. We can sue him and his brokerage, and we can file a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Commission. They will suspend or even revoke his license for this." The thought of taking legal action was daunting, but Alina's confidence was reassuring. She advised us that while the emails were powerful, a recorded admission of his knowledge would be the final, undeniable nail in his coffin. It would remove any possibility of him claiming the emails were misunderstood or that he believed the repair had been adequate. The plan was simple, yet devious. We needed to get Ethan to admit what he knew, and we needed to record it. The opportunity presented itself a few weeks later in the form of an invitation to a family dinner. It was my sister's birthday, and the entire family was expected to be there. It was the perfect venue, public, yet intimate enough for a private conversation. David was hesitant, the thought of pretending everything was normal in a room full of family making him physically uncomfortable. But I was resolute. This was our chance. We spent the week leading up to the dinner preparing. I purchased a small, high-quality digital voice recorder, the kind journalists use for interviews. It was tiny, easily concealable, and had a powerful microphone. I practiced turning it on and off discreetly until the motion was as natural as reaching for my phone. We rehearsed our conversation, planning the questions I would ask and how I would steer the conversation towards the house. The goal was not to be accusatory, but to appear naive and desperate, to appeal to the very sense of family obligation that he had so cynically exploited. The night of the dinner, my heart was hammering in my chest, but my hands were steady. I slipped the recorder into the small side pocket of my purse, pressing the record button as we walked up to my sister's front door. The house was filled with the warm, familiar chaos of a family gathering. Ethan was there, holding court by the fireplace, a glass of wine in his hand, looking relaxed and confident. He greeted us with his usual charismatic smile, asking how we were settling into the new house. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I forced a weary smile and told him we were having some issues and that I was hoping to talk to him about it later to get his advice. I played the part of the overwhelmed new homeowner, and he fell for it completely, his expression shifting to one of feigned concern. "Of course," he said, patting my arm reassuringly. "Anything for family." After dinner, as people began to mingle, I found Ethan alone in the kitchen, refilling his drink. This was my chance. I approached him, my expression a carefully crafted mask of anxiety. I told him about the leak, about the rot and the mold, about the escalating costs of the repairs. I kept my voice low, my tone conveying a sense of helplessness. "We're just overwhelmed, Ethan," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "We poured everything we had into this house. We don't know what to do." He listened, his face a study in performative sympathy. He shook his head and sighed. "Julie, I'm so sorry to hear that, but like I said, these old houses can be unpredictable. You never know what you're going to find." This was the moment. I looked him in the eye, my gaze pleading. "But you knew, didn't you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The previous owner, Mrs. Jenkins, she told us she had contacted you about the same leak last year. She said you told her how to fix it." His smile faltered just for a second. A flicker of panic flashed in his eyes before he quickly composed himself. He let out a small, dismissive laugh. "Oh, that," he said, waving his hand as if brushing away a fly. "That was a minor drip. She was an old lady prone to exaggeration. She had it repaired. I made sure of it. It was a resolved issue." He was trying to downplay it, to control the narrative. I pressed on, my voice still sounding desperate and confused. "But Ethan," the contractor saw. The repair was just cosmetic. They said anyone with any real estate experience would have known it wasn't a proper fix. Mrs. Jenkins said you told her not to disclose it." I let the accusation hang in the air, framed as a question from a naive younger sister-in-law seeking clarity. His composure finally cracked. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look," he said, his tone sharp and irritated. "You need to understand how this business works. If you disclose every little thing, you'll never sell a house. I got you a great deal on that place, saved you from a bidding war. The commission I made barely covered my time. A little water damage is a small price to pay for a house in that neighborhood. I did you a favor." And there it was, the confession. A clear, unambiguous admission that he knew about the damage, that he knew the repair was inadequate, and that he had deliberately concealed it. He had framed his fraud as a favor, a piece of savvy business that we should be grateful for. The arrogance, the condescension, the complete lack of remorse, it was all there in his voice. I mumbled something about being confused and needing to think, and quickly excused myself. I walked to the bathroom, my hands shaking, and stopped the recording. I had it. I had his lies, his arrogance, and his admission, all captured in a crystal-clear audio file. The trap had been sprung. The foundation of his career, built on a bedrock of lies and deceit, was about to be washed away. The week after the dinner party was the calm before the storm. We handed the recording over to our lawyer, Alina, who was thrilled. "This is it," she said, a grim smile on her face. "This is everything we need." She began drafting the official complaint to the State Real Estate Commission and preparing the lawsuit against Ethan and his brokerage. The wheels of justice were turning, but I knew that a legal victory, while necessary, wouldn't be enough. A lawsuit would take months, even years, to resolve. The commission's investigation would be confidential until they reached a finding. In the meantime, Ethan would continue to operate, to sell houses, to build his reputation on a foundation of lies. He would continue to smile his charming smile, shake hands, and betray the trust of other unsuspecting families. I wanted more than just financial compensation. I wanted accountability. I wanted the people in his professional life, the people whose respect he craved, to know exactly who he was. The idea came to me when I saw a new listing online. It was a high-end property, a beautiful modern home in the most affluent part of town. The listing agent was Ethan. He was holding an exclusive, agents-only open house on the upcoming Saturday. It was an event designed for networking, for real estate professionals to tour the property, enjoy some catered food and drinks, and for Ethan to showcase himself as a major player in the luxury market. It was a performance, and I decided it was time to pull back the curtain. My plan was risky, and it went beyond our lawyer's advice, but it felt right. It felt necessary. David was worried, but he saw the look in my eyes and knew that I wouldn't be deterred. He trusted me. I spent the next few days preparing. With David's help, I set up a simple, anonymous website. The domain name was a variation of Ethan's name and the word fraud. On the homepage, we embedded the audio file from the dinner party, complete with a transcript. We uploaded the photos of the water damage, the rotten joists, the mold. We posted screenshots of the email chain between Ethan and Mrs. Jenkins, with her personal information redacted. We wrote a clear, concise summary of the entire affair, detailing every lie, every manipulation, every step of his calculated deception. The website was a digital archive of his crime, a permanent record of his betrayal. The final step was to create a QR code that linked directly to the website. I had 100 small, professional-looking cards printed, with the QR code on one side and the words, "Ask him about the water damage," on the other. On Saturday, I dressed in professional attire, looking every bit the part of a real estate agent or a potential buyer. I arrived at the open house and was greeted by Ethan, who was in his element, radiating success and charm. He was surprised to see me, but he recovered quickly, his professional mask snapping back into place. "Julie, what a surprise," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Looking to upgrade already?" I gave him a small, enigmatic smile. "Just wanted to see what you were up to, Ethan. Impressive listing." I took a brochure from the table and began to wander through the house. The place was filled with real estate agents from various brokerages, all dressed in sharp suits, chatting and sipping champagne. They were Ethan's colleagues, his competitors, his peers. They were the audience for my final performance. I moved through the crowd, making small talk, pretending to admire the architecture. And as I did, I left a trail of my little white cards behind me. I tucked one into a bowl of decorative stones, left another on a stack of brochures, and slid one into the pocket of a coat that was draped over a chair. I found the catering table and placed a dozen cards next to the napkins, the QR code facing up, an invitation to curiosity. My most audacious move was in the gleaming, state-of-the-art kitchen. Ethan was there, laughing with a group of agents from his own brokerage, including his boss. I waited for a moment when his back was turned, and I walked up to the large, stainless steel refrigerator. I took out a small magnet from my purse and affixed one of the cards directly to the fridge door, at eye level, a silent accusation in the heart of his triumphant showcase. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. My work was done. I walked out of the open house, my heart pounding, a strange sense of calm washing over me. I had planted the seeds of his destruction, and now all I had to do was wait for them to grow. The first sign that my plan had worked came less than an hour later. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "What did you do? Ethan is calling me, freaking out." Then came a call from Ethan himself. I let it go to voicemail. He left a rambling, furious message, his voice a mixture of panic and rage. He screamed, he threatened, he begged. The charming facade had been shattered, revealing the desperate, cornered man underneath. By Monday morning, the website had been shared throughout the local real estate community. A leaner called to tell me that the managing broker from Ethan's agency had contacted her. They had seen the website, they had heard the recording, and they were in full-blown damage control mode. They fired Ethan that same day and made it clear they wanted to settle our lawsuit as quickly and quietly as possible. The professional reputation that Ethan had spent years building had been dismantled in a single afternoon. He had built his house on a foundation of lies, and I had simply opened the windows and let the storm in. The aftermath of the open house was swift and decisive. The story of Ethan's fraud, propelled by the undeniable evidence on the website I had created, spread through the local real estate community like a wildfire. His name became toxic. Colleagues who had once admired his ambition now spoke of him in hushed, cautionary tones. The QR codes had done their job, turning his moment of professional triumph into a public shaming. He was a pariah in the industry he had worked so hard to conquer. His brokerage, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, settled our lawsuit quickly. The settlement they offered was more than enough to cover the extensive repairs to our house, the cost of our legal fees, and the significant emotional distress we had endured. It was a financial victory, a necessary step in making us whole again, but the true victory was not in the money. It was in the accountability. The State Real Estate Commission, presented with our lawyer's meticulously documented complaint and the irrefutable evidence from the recording, launched their own investigation. It concluded several months later with the permanent revocation of Ethan's real estate license. The official ruling cited gross negligence, fraudulent misrepresentation, and unethical conduct. The career he had built on deceit was officially over. He could no longer use his charm and position to manipulate and harm other families. The system had worked. His professional life, as he knew it, was in ruins. The fallout within the family was, as expected, messy and painful. My sister, caught between her loyalty to her husband and the undeniable proof of his actions, was devastated. Their marriage, already strained by his arrogance and ambition, crumbled under the weight of his public disgrace and financial ruin. They separated a few months after he was fired, and their beautiful home, the one where he had plotted his deceptions, was sold to cover their mounting debts. I took no joy in the collapse of their marriage, but I also felt no guilt. I had not destroyed their family. Ethan had, with his greed and his lies. I had simply refused to be another one of his secrets, another victim swept under the rug for the sake of keeping up appearances. Our relationship with that side of the family is still strained, but David and I have found peace in the truth. We chose honesty over a comfortable lie, and in doing so, we preserved the integrity of our own small family. As for our house, it is finally the home we dreamed it would be. With the settlement money, we were able to hire the best contractors, people who took pride in their work. They didn't just repair the damage, they made the house stronger, better than it was before. They replaced the rotten joists with solid new beams, installed new plumbing, and restored the ceilings and floors to pristine condition. The work was long and arduous, but with each new nail and every fresh coat of paint, we were not just rebuilding a house, we were reclaiming our home. We were overwriting the story of betrayal with a new one, a story of resilience and renewal. The faint, musty smell of damp and deceit is gone, replaced by the scent of sawdust, fresh paint, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Sometimes, when the afternoon light streams through the large living room windows, I think about the journey that brought us here. The anger has faded, replaced by a quiet sense of strength. The ordeal taught us a painful but valuable lesson about the nature of trust and the importance of fighting for what is right, even when it is difficult, even when it means standing up to your own family. We no longer take anything at our own risk. We learned that a foundation, whether of a house or a relationship, must be built on honesty and integrity. Anything else is just waiting to crumble. We have our home, we have our integrity, and we have each other. And that is a foundation that no storm can wash away. We are safe, we are whole, and we are finally at peace in the home we fought so hard to save.